"All right, listen up!" Mr. DiMartino shouted, getting everyone's attention once the buses were empty. "We've reserved rooms for everyone at both of these fine establishments. It has been decided that everyone will be split into 2 groups. Everyone with the last name starting with the letter A through M, you shall be staying here at Erbie. N through Z, if by some godforsaken chance we have anyone whose uncaring parents gave them a last name starting with Z, will be staying at Nick's. 4 to a room, people," he continued sternly. "All male and all female only. As amusing as Jerry Springer may be, we don't want to see any of our students making appearances with their baby mamas or daddies in tow. Are we clear?" As people began moving to the main offices of their respective motels, Stacy stood in the middle and did some quick mental calculation, then did it again and again just to make sure she wasn't mistaken. Right on the verge of hyperventilation, she approached DiMartino and tried to clear her throat to get his attention. All that came out was a strange combination hiccup and squeak. The teacher said distractedly as he kept a watchful eye on the departing students. "Oh, Miss Rowe, how can I help you?"
"Well, it's just that, you know—"
"No, Miss Rowe, I'm afraid I do not know," he said testily. The threat that he might actually turn his head and look at her with that one huge bulging eye loosened Stacy's tongue.
"It's just that all my friends are going to be over here because of their last names, and I'm going to be stuck over on the other side of the road all by myself."
"Yes, that's quite unfortunate, my dear," he told her with what sounded like pity at first, but eventually turned into snarling sarcasm. "But I do not make the rules. I merely apply them with complete and utter disdain for the feelings of all involved." Stacy twisted the toe of her shoe into the ground nervously.
"I know, Mr. DiMartino," she said, "but I was just wondering if maybe I could stay over here for tonight."
DiMartino's head snapped around so he could glare at the irritant at his side. But by the time he'd finished the move, Stacy had already turned tail and fled back towards the buses. Jane and Daria moved out of the way as the Stacy rocket tore up to the side of the bus, grabbed all her bags from the luggage compartment, and then blasted off again in the direction of Nick's Inn, moving almost fast enough to leave a blue denim blur behind her as she ran. "Wow, that was hard to watch," Jane said as she and Daria resumed tugging their own backpacks out. "Might even feel sorry for her if she hadn't tried to drill my brain out with that story about sky blue sweater or whatever." "I'm sorry I missed it," Daria said, sounding as if she wasn't sorry she missed it at all. Yeah, said Jane. With their packs finally dislodged from the mass of nylon wedged into the bus's side, they began to trek to the main office to grab their key. "So how are you feeling about your little power nap, anyway?" "Oh, completely and utterly awake," Daria groused. "I'm starting to think it's less insomnia and more that my circadian rhythm has done a complete 180. There's no way I'm getting any sleep tonight." Jane raised her eyebrows in sympathy. "Bummer," she said. "But hey, I tell you what. Just this once, I'll let you play the best friend card and stay up with you all night so we can both be tired out of our heads tomorrow. You know, if you want me to." "I don't know. Aren't you going to miss all that wild fun and excitement at the Museum of Science?" 4 or 5 hours of having to listen to Ms. Barge try and take the whole trip seriously in between accusations of male hypocrisy? I think sleeping the trip away in the museum lobby is a much more rational choice. They arrived at the office to find Ms. Defoe standing out front, handing keys out to passing students. The art teacher's face broke into a warm smile when she saw Jane. "I'm sure you and Daria would like to have a room together, wouldn't you?" she said, pulling a key attached to a giant wedge of plastic from the batch in her hand and giving it to them. "Well, I believe we can accommodate that." "Can we also accommodate the other 2 people out of our room and into another?" Daria asked with little hope. "I'm afraid not, Daria," Claire said sadly. "But you'll be staying with Andrea and Jennifer. You're friends with them, right?" Daria and Jane glanced at each other. "I guess sharing a room with them is better than a kick to the head," Daria reasoned. "And by strange coincidence, Andrea will probably be giving out kicks to the head sometime tonight," Jane added mock cheerfully. "Don't worry, I'm sure we'll be fine," she reassured Claire when she saw the teacher's stricken expression. "The goth and the burnout meet the brain and the art chick. We'll be in outcast heaven. Trust me." As the 2 girls moved on and the next group of students came up looking for their keys, Claire reflected solemnly on her own position as the art chick in her own little group. 3 similar outcasts from her college days that still roomed with her in her loft and basically sucked everything, particularly money, time, and patience, out of her on a regular basis. She was reasonably sure that she hadn't, but some small part of her still imagined that she may have sent Jane and Daria to a similar if shorter-term doom. She tried to put on her best happy face as the last of the students, the school's fashion club, stepped up to her. She gave them the last of the keys and was about to go on to her own room when Sandy cleared her throat loudly and insistently. "Excuse me, like Ms. Defoe or whatever," the girl said forcefully, "but you have given us only 2 keys. Where are the other 2? "Oh, I'm afraid this is all the office is allowed to give out," she told them. "The only other keys they have for the rooms are reserved for their housekeeping staff. You'll just have to stick together and be careful not to lock anyone out." "In that case, I believe I should be the one to hold both copies," Sandy said, turning to the other girls and holding out her hand. "As president of the fashion club, I am hereby instating a fashion lockdown until the morning. I believe it is prudent under the circumstances. This town is so unfashionable and dusty that it may cause irreparable damage to both our clothing and our senses. Agreed?" Quinn turned the second key in her hand a few times, her entire body seeming to twist slightly under pressure, but finally gave it up to Sandy with a cheerful look of defeat. "Of course, Sandy," she said as the transfer of power took place. "I was just about to suggest the same thing, but it's much better that you said it." "I'm sorry to interrupt, girls," Claire suddenly said, "but I just noticed. Where's Stacy? Isn't she part of your club?" Sandy tossed her hair back and stuck her nose up in the air. "Yes, well, due to the capriciousness of fate or whatever, Stacy Rowe is taking an involuntary fashion sabbatical at the other motel." "And thank goodness, right?" Tori interjected with a nasty laugh. I mean, it's a real shame," she added quickly, if insincerely, when she saw the looks Claire and Quinn were giving her. "But rules are rules, and her last name starts with an R." As the girls trotted off to their room, Claire watched them go and turned to look at Nick's inn in the distance. All of her worry about Daria and Jane had dissolved, replaced by a new concern. She briefly considered walking across the street and making sure Stacy was all right, but Ms. Lee had wanted all the teachers to meet after the students had been settled in, and the temperamental principal could be more than a handful if she was kept waiting. With one last glance over at Nick's, Claire turned and started walking back to the buses for the undoubtedly tedious and pointless meeting ahead. "Oh, hello, Stacy. How are you this evening?" The sickly sweet tones of Timothy O'Neill's voice hit Stacy's ear like sticky tree sap. She walked up to the shallow stairway to the entrance of Nick's, sighed, and said, "I'm fine, Mr. O'Neill. Thanks for asking." "Oh, my goodness," he said, severely distressed at her tone. "It doesn't sound like everything is fine. Is there anything I can do for you? You know, I was just reading about this great form of therapy that involves banging a drum while talking about your problems and innermost thoughts. I think I can find a drum." "No, Mr. O'Neill," Stacy said quickly, eyes wide and hands up to defend herself from having to hear about the latest of his unending pop therapy ideas. "I'll be okay, really. Just... Can I get the key to my room, please? I think I just need to lie down for a while." O'Neill nodded, his face a too sincere mask of sympathy. Of course," he murmured as he handed her a key hanging from a toy alligator, the mascot of Nick's Inn from the look of the garishly lit sign next to the road. "And if you need anything, don't be afraid to come by the teacher's room in 103 and ask for me. I might even have that drum by the time you stop by." "Please don't on my account," she thought, but neglected to say as she hastened to make her getaway. The Erbie Motel had been painted a bright blue, almost the exact shade that she tried to tell Jane about earlier, but she could see in the waning light of the sun that Nick's was a filthy brown color that almost but didn't quite resemble mud. The red trimming didn't help any, and in fact it almost looked like blood. She stuck out her tongue in disgust and almost bit it in surprise when the parking lot lamps snapped on overhead. Checking the door numbers against the number on the toy gator, she estimated that her room was located at almost the end of the row. Nick's, just like Erbie's across the way, was comprised of 3 separate buildings forming a U-shape, all one story and with a bit of space in between them at the corners. She counted herself lucky that she was at the near corner at least, instead of the far one. As the lamps gradually warmed up, it became apparent that they washed out everything in their sodium light. She was having a hard enough time as it was that someone needed to see her under suboptimal lighting conditions. A dark shape stepped out of the shadows into her path and leaned up against one of the supports for the building's overhang. Her heart nearly leaped out of her chest before she saw who it was. "Oh," she said softly. Hi, Kevin." Kevin's eyes dropped down a bit as he struck what he undoubtedly thought was a sexy pose. "Hey, babe." Stacy looked around her briefly, then said,
Kevin? I'm Stacy, not Brittany."
"Yeah, I know, babe," he returned, undeterred. "Brittany's not here. That's kind of the point, you know. Just you and me and the moths." Looking up, she could see that the moths were indeed starting to congregate around the lot lights.
"Moths aren't really that romantic, Kevin," she said. "And you've got a girlfriend. And there are strict Fashion Club bylaws which state—"
As she tried to move around him, Kevin quickly sidestepped back into her way. "Well, the Fashion Club in-laws aren't here either," he said. "So why don't you and me go back to my place and, you know." Stacy felt disgust run through her entire body as he waggled his eyebrows and leered at her. With a force born of that disgust, she looked him right in the eyes and flatly stated, "Kevin, no." The football player deflated immediately, every pretense of romantic intent gone.
"Aw, really?" he said. "Aw, man, that totally blows." "Yes, but I'm sure you'll learn to live with it someday," she said as she walked around him and breathed a sigh of relief.
Night was coming down even quicker than before, with only deep red surrounding a few swaths of purple indicating the location of the sun on the horizon. Stacy picked up her pace, feeling more desperate than ever just to get inside, set her bags down, and fall into a nice deep sleep. But once again she found her path blocked, this time by a skinny blonde cheerleader with massive pigtails. Creases of anger showed on the other girl's otherwise flawless face as she stared Stacy down, hands on hips.
"You stay away from my Kevy!"
Brittany squeaked furiously.
"What? No! Look, Britt, I'm sorry, but he came on to me."
Stacy found herself trying to explain, the words running all over each other in the effort to come out of her mouth.
"I didn't try anything. I promise. I told him no. You have to believe me."
Brittany simply crossed her arms and turned her face up and away.
"Well, I don't believe you because my Kevy would never do such a thing. We're in a deep, committed relationship."
"What about all those times you guys cheated on each other?" Stacy nearly dropped her bags to the ground in an attempt to slap both of her hands over her mouth. She couldn't believe what she had just said, and from the expression on Brittany's face, the cheerleader hadn't expected it either. But try as she might, Stacy couldn't manage to make the words rewind back into her mouth.
"Look, Brittany, I'm sorry," she babbled. "I didn't mean to say that. I don't know what came over me." "No, nuh-uh," said Brittany. "It's too late. I hate you forever now, and I never want to see or hear from you ever again, ever. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to my room."
With that cold proclamation, the blonde girl turned on her heel and walked away. Stunned but unable to think of what else to do, Stacy hitched the straps of her luggage back up onto her shoulders and went back to searching for her own room. Moments later, she and Brittany stared at each other in horror as they found themselves standing in front of the same door. They both held up their keychains at the same time, checked and double-checked both them and each other's, and then groaned in shared misery.
"This isn't fair," Brittany pouted. "I can't share a room with you. I hate you now. It would never work out."
Stacy leaned against the wall beside the door and covered her face with her hands as a few sobs began to escape her chest. She felt almost certain that where Brittany was staying, there had to be 2 other cheerleaders lying in wait, and with one of them already hating her, it was just a matter of time before all 3 were. Ever since she had gotten off the bus, everything had seemed to be moving way too fast for her to assimilate properly, and she finally felt like she was nearing her limit. Even the stress of being the secretary of the Fashion Club and under the constant pressure of Sandy's thumb for most of every day hadn't prepared her for the constant barrage of the field trip from hell that technically hadn't even truly begun yet. Raking her fingernails lightly down her face while trying to simultaneously wipe away some of the tears that had sprung up, Stacy took a deep breath and then handed her key to Brittany, who looked down at it in confusion.
"Go ahead, take it," she said, shaking the gator insistently at the other girl to show her sincerity.
When Brittany finally reached out and grabbed the key from her hand, she said,
"Just, if you would, look for someone to switch rooms with me and make sure they bring their key to me before disappearing in there with you, would you? I think I'm just going to sit down here for a while."
Brittany looked at her with a worried expression, but simply nodded and started walking the line of doors, knocking on the next one down. Meanwhile, Stacy wearily dragged herself diagonally across the parking lot until she was around 1/4 of the way along the back building of the motel. She turned around, dropped her bags to the asphalt, and sat on one of the cracked concrete wheel stops. She wasn't sure exactly how long she had been there before she heard the crunching of rocks as Brittany approached, pressed a key into her hand, and left without saying a word.